Bonjour French 1. Today's video is all about asking how someone is doing. We'll start with asking the actual question, how's it going and how are you doing, and all of those different things of asking somebody how they're feeling at a particular time. You'll notice that some of these have the exact same translation. I want to remind you that that's because French doesn't always translate word for word to English. So it's more of a general idea and showing you some different versions of the same thing. Just like how in English you can say how's it going or how are you doing, same kind of thing in French. There's multiple ways of expressing the same idea or the same question. Keep in mind that as I read these to you and explain them to you, I will pause after I say something in French for you to repeat after me. So the first question is, Comment ça va? Como, the C word here at the beginning, which doesn't sound like comment by the way, is actually the word for how. So when you ask Comment ça va, you're literally asking how is it going. But remember in class we learned the second phrase, which is ça va, which is just kind of another way of saying is it going well for you. Comment allez-vous? Maybe a phrase that you've heard before. It's the formal way of asking how are you doing. And don't get me wrong, we'll talk about that in just a second. But for now, comment allez-vous is still how are you doing, but it's the formal version. And then this last phrase is actually not asking how somebody's doing. It's used if somebody asks you how you're doing. And instead of repeating it back to them and asking ça va, again, like when we first learned how to do this in class, you can say and you, as in and what about you? Same question right back at you. Just like how comment allez-vous we said was formal, there are two different versions of and you. There's this version right here, et toi, which is and you, for somebody informally, so go ahead and practice saying that, et toi. And then there's this one, same meaning, still means and you, but it's the formal version, and it's pronounced et vous. Now this difference between informal and formal language is something we don't necessarily have in the English language. You definitely speak differently to your friends when you're speaking informally than when you're going on a job interview and you should be speaking formally. But there's not two different versions of the same sentence based on who you're talking to. It just tends to be that you use certain language and words around your friends that you probably wouldn't use on a job interview. French is a little bit different. As you can see here, there's literally two different ways of saying and you based on who you're talking to. So just to clarify, and you might want to jot this down, if you are speaking informally, you're speaking informally because you're using that language around people about your own age, your peers, or adults that you're really familiar with, family members, things like that. Formal language is used around adults that you're not so familiar with or people you just don't know in general. You don't really treat them the same way that you would somebody that you're really close with. You would use formal language if you were speaking to a teacher or a principal at school. Even though we do get to know each other and get along pretty well, you don't actually use formal or informal language with me. You'd want to speak formally. Same thing on job interviews. You would want to use formal language. So be careful. If you're talking amongst friends and one of them asks you comment ça va, and you respond, and then you want to say and you, then you'll say et toi. But if I ask you, and you want to be extra special polite like you should be, and I say comment ça va, and you'd like to ask me back and you'll need to say et vous. Let's talk about the responses. Once again, make sure that you're repeating after me. Let's go ahead and make this bigger on the fly here. 3 different ways of saying that things are going good for you. The first way is by saying bien, which just means well. If you put the word très in front of that, you get très bien, which means very well. And this last one actually translates word for word, ça va bien. It's going well. Now, if you're having just an okay day, the first phrase on your list here is one we've learned before, which is ça va. And then your book adds the word merci. Merci just means thank you, and you can really add that to anything you'd like, although you'll sound pretty sarcastic if you say not too well, thanks. But either way, the word for thank you is merci. If you want to say that you're doing not bad, the words are pas mal. And if you want to say that you're doing so-so, as in you're just doing okay, then you're doing plus ou moins. And finally, if you're having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, then you need to respond to the comment ça va question by saying pas très bien, which means not very well or not too well.